Today is January 22nd, 2025. My name is Rob Carr of Kalamazoo Right to Life, and this is Pro-Life Week. Well, if you think about that date, January 22nd, it might ring a bell. On this day, back in 1973, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on Roe v. Wade. It became the law of the land in all 50 states, legal abortion. A dark day, a black day, as President Roosevelt would say, a day that would live in infamy for people in the pro-life community. And the following year, 1974, Nellie Gray, in Washington, a native of Washington, D.C., on the board of directors for the National Right to Life Committee, launched the March for Life, which became and is today the largest pro-life gathering in the nation. And most recently, last maybe 10 years, about 100,000 people descend on the Capitol on Washington, and they hear speeches and songs, and then they march to the Supreme Court building down Constitution Avenue. And I've attended two of them, but that was quite a long time ago. It's a great event. It's great being among fellow believers in the sanctity of human life. And this year, this is going to be held this Friday on January 24th. So, and that's a good thing. Even though Roe is no longer an issue, it's been replaced by Dobbs, it's still time to come together and reflect on life, the loss of life, and how women have been exploited by the abortion industry for 50 years, and then reflect on how God is the author of life, and for that we would celebrate. This past Monday, January 20th, was a very historic day. First, you had the fact that it was the Martin Luther King national holiday, which is great. Celebrate the life of an amazing American citizen, Martin Luther King. And then that evening was the Ohio State Notre Dame NCAA final championship football game, and the Buckeyes actually beat Notre Dame quite convincingly, I would say. But so those are two big events on the same day. But I would say, if you're taking a poll of most people, they would say that the biggest thing that happened on January 20th was the inauguration of our 47th president, Donald Trump. You've got to go back to 1892, when Grover Cleveland was reelected. Now, he was elected in 1884. He was defeated when he ran for re-election in 1888. And then in 1892, he was re-elected to become the first president to serve two non-consecutive terms. Well, here we are. It's 2024. Donald Trump was elected in 2016, defeated in 2020, and then re-elected in 2024. So he and Grover Cleveland share that distinction of being the only two presidents to serve not two non-consecutive terms. And it was I was glued to my TV. I really was. It was inside because of the weather, it was inside the Capitol building in the Rotunda, a room that I've been in before, and I'm sure many of you have as well. It was just a great event. His speech, it did start off a little, I would say, a little dark, a little hard, but overall, I thought it was a good speech. He outlined the kinds of things he wants to see and the vision he has for our country. And I know Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had to just kind of sit there and take some of the abuse that Trump was dishing out. But they put America in a bad place, and he was kind of taking them to task. But I really enjoyed the rendition of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. You had a group of maybe 20 or 30 soldiers. I think there might have been either naval or Marines that came in. men and women. They were just great, very inspiring. Carrie Underwood was brought in to sing "America the Beautiful," and she's waiting for like the soundtrack, the music that would accompany her voice, and there was a glitch. And for about a minute there, everybody's just kind of waiting, and she's waiting with the microphone in her hand, and then she finally says something like, "Well, let's sing it. Let's see if we get all the lyrics right," something like that, and she sings "America the Beautiful" a cappella, and it was great, just great. I know she wasn't going to allow some kind of a technical difficulty interfere with that moment, with that song, and she did a great job. Okay. So and then later on, Trump's going to sign about 200 executive orders, and some of them are kind of I'm not sure about, but for the most part, I agree with almost all of them. You know, the renaming Mount Denali in Alaska back to Mount McKinley. I'm not too sure about that. Calling the Gulf of Mexico, renaming it the Gulf of America. I'm not sure how that's going to fly with cartographers all over the world. But for the most part, I support Trump's aggressive policy changes through these executive orders. But I heard this yesterday, that a member of Congress in the House, Chip Roy, he's a representative from Texas. He's kind of a disruptor of sorts. So he's been a little, he hasn't really been a good team player when it comes to voting for Republican speakers of the House. I know he was a thorn in the side of Kevin McCarthy, and he's got some issues with Mike Johnson, but he is 100% pro-life. I mean, he's great. He's just great, and he's going to introduce legislation to repeal or abolish the FACE Act. Okay, we've talked about the FACE Act a lot. It stands for Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. Got to go back, a little backstory. Back in the back in the 1980s, early 1990s, Operation Rescue was big in the movement. They would go into abortion clinics, sit down, or they would block doors, prevent employees or clients from entering, shutting down clinics because no one could get in to do to their jobs. And they were very successful for a while, and then eventually that wave of civil disobedience kind of dissipated. But pro-lifers, not all pro-lifers, but some pro-lifers have still been engaging in those forms or types of civil disobedience. And Congress, at that time led by the Democrats, they introduced legislation to make it a federal crime to block the entrance of an abortion clinic. And it was passed by the House and the Senate, and it was signed in 1994 by Bill Clinton. Okay, but after the FACE Act became law, I don't really remember hearing about that many people who were actually arrested for it. During the end of the Clinton years, the George W. Bush years, even Barack Obama, I don't remember pro-lifers being arrested for FACE Act violations. But then, boom, when Biden comes along, and all of a sudden the FACE Act is big business. And about 2 or 3 dozen pro-lifers were arrested for violating this act. And and they could have spent time in prison. Apparently, I know it's up to the discretion, perhaps, of the judge that prosecutes these people, but you could get up to like 10 or 11 years in prison for basically trespassing. Now, these people are not going in, burning, blowing up buildings. They're not doing that. They're not spray painting, pro-life messages on walls. They're going in. they're blocking doors, they're sitting down, they're praying, maybe they're singing a hymn or some Christian songs. They're not engaging in violence whatsoever. But according to the Biden people, they're breaking the law. It's a federal crime, up to 10 years in prison. And there was a person, I think about a year and a half ago, was sentenced to a 5-year prison term. 5 years for basically sitting on the floor at an abortion clinic and praying. 5 years for that. Well, Chip Roy is going to introduce legislation to repeal this. And I admit that if you trespass on private property, on a business, I understand that you could be arrested. I understand that. But 5 to 10 years in prison for that? I can see you get arrested for trespassing. You've got to pay a $500 fine and pay your court costs. I can see that. And maybe to get this thing passed through, the Senate, because, the Senate still has this issue with the filibuster, that you need 60 votes to pass a bill in the Senate if there was going to be a filibuster. Obviously, if there's not going to be a filibuster, all you need is 51 senators. But if there's going to be a filibuster, you need 60 to break cloture, which is the term to bypass or to stop a filibuster. So if he needs a little bit of compromise to get that with some senators to avoid a filibuster, then that might be something that he could do. Saying, yes, there are some times when violating the law in the area of a trespass is an act that can be punishable, but it's a process crime. You pay your fine, you pay the court costs, and you don't spend a day in jail. And that's what it should be. There should never have been a time when FACE Act violators should have spent a day in jail, let alone 5 to 10 years in prison. Okay, so we'll see how this act pans out in the committee, and I'm sure it's going to pass in the House, and the Republicans control the Senate. But it'll all depend on whether or not the Democrats, the minority Democrats in the Senate, want to filibuster this law. The law should have been abolished years ago, and this is a golden opportunity for the Republicans to do just that. With that, I'll let you go, and I'll see you next time.